My name is Nora Whitfield, and for most of my life, people have described me with words like strong, dependable, the one who always shows up. What they don't say, what they never ask, is whether I'm tired of being those things. That question followed me as I stood outside my parents' house on New Year's Eve, keys still in my hand, engine ticking as it cooled. I'd driven straight from work, still wearing the same black slacks and blazer I'd put on before sunrise. 12 hours at the office. No dinner. A headache pulsing just behind my eyes. I sat there longer than necessary, staring at the warm yellow glow spilling through the windows, listening to laughter leak into the cold air. I already knew how the night would go. I always did. Inside, the house smelled like champagne and roasted meat, a heavy sweetness that clung to everything. My mother glanced up when I came in, her eyes flicking briefly to my coat, my bag, the tired slump of my shoulders. She didn't comment. She never did. Instead, she handed me a stack of plates like it was instinct. "Can you set these out?" she said, already turning away. "No hello. No you made it. Just assignment." My father sat in his usual chair, glass in hand, watching the countdown channel on mute. "You're late," he said, checking his watch. "Not glad you're here. Just late." I nodded, because nodding was easier than explaining that traffic had stalled or that my meeting had run long or that I'd skipped lunch to finish a report that wasn't even mine. I moved through the room automatically, placing plates, straightening napkins, making myself useful before anyone could accuse me of not being. That was my role. The reliable one. The filler of gaps. The quiet problem solver. My younger sister, Lena, was curled into the corner of the couch, phone glowing in her lap. She was 26, soft-spoken, always described as sensitive. The family treated her like glass, something fragile, something that might crack if handled too roughly. I caught her eye for a second. She gave me a small smile, then looked back down at her screen. I'd been protecting Lena for years, paying for things no one asked her to handle, stepping in when she panicked, making excuses for her when she couldn't show up. It started after college and never really stopped. And every time I did, my parents nodded approvingly, like I was fulfilling a responsibility I'd been born into. The guests arrived slowly. An aunt with loud opinions. A cousin who always asked why I wasn't married yet. Friends of my parents who'd known me since I was a child and still spoke to me like I was 15. I smiled. I listened. I refilled glasses. I'd learned long ago that if I stayed pleasant and useful, the night would pass with minimal damage. Still, something felt different. Tighter. Like the air was charged. I caught my reflection in the hallway mirror as I passed, hair pulled back too neatly, makeup just enough to look put together but not enough to invite comments. I dressed carefully for family events. Attractive, but not threatening. Polished, but not flashy. Anything else invited critique. I remembered the job offer I'd turned down last year. A promotion in another state. My mother had cried when I told her. Said it would tear the family apart. That Lena needed me close. That moving would be selfish. So I stayed. The clock crept closer to midnight. Someone turned the TV volume up. Champagne bottles popped, sharp and celebratory. The room buzzed with forced cheer, voices overlapping, laughter a little too loud. I stood near the edge of the room, glass untouched in my hand. My feet ached. My head throbbed. I thought about how, if I slipped out quietly, no one would notice for at least 20 minutes. Then my mother stood. She tapped her glass gently, smiling wide, the way she did when she wanted the room's attention. Conversations faded. All eyes turned toward her. "To a new year," she began, voice bright, confident. "To fresh starts, family, and taking care of each other." People nodded. Glasses lifted. She paused, then turned, not to the room, but directly toward me. I felt it before she spoke. That tightening in my chest. That instinctive brace. This year, she said, lifting her glass higher, Nora will finally step up and help her sister properly. The room went quiet. My heart dropped. I stared at her, unsure if I'd misheard. She's been under so much stress, my mother continued, smiling like this was generosity, not demand. And Nora has always been so capable. So we thought, what better way to start the year than with family supporting family? Every face turned toward me, waiting, expecting, and in that moment, standing there with my untouched glass, exhaustion crashing over me all at once, I realized something with sudden, terrifying clarity. This wasn't a suggestion. It was an announcement. And whatever came next was going to break something that had been bending for years. For a few seconds after my mother finished speaking, no one reacted. Not confusion, not laughter, not even discomfort, just silence. It stretched longer than it should have, thick and heavy, like the room itself was waiting to see what I would do. I felt every eye on me, measuring, expecting, already deciding. My father was the first to move. He lifted his glass slightly toward me, a gesture that looked supportive to anyone who didn't know him. "This makes sense," he said evenly. "You're stable. Lena isn't. It's temporary." Temporary. That word had followed me for years. Temporary help that turned into permanent obligation. Temporary sacrifice that became my default state. I opened my mouth, then closed it again. Not because I didn't know what to say, but because I knew exactly what would happen if I said it. If I refused, I'd be selfish. If I hesitated, I'd be ungrateful. If I agreed, I'd disappear a little more. My sister didn't look up. Her eyes were fixed on her phone, knuckles pale where she gripped it. She hadn't been asked anything. She hadn't volunteered. She was letting it happen the same way she always did, by being quiet and fragile and letting someone else carry the weight. Around us, conversation cautiously restarted. Someone laughed too loudly. Someone clinked glasses like the moment had passed. But it hadn't. My mother leaned closer, her voice low now, private but sharp. "Don't make this awkward," she whispered. "We're all counting on you." Counting on me. I took a sip of champagne then, more out of instinct than enjoyment. It tasted sour. The bubbles burned on the way down. I thought about the extra shifts I'd picked up last month. The credit card balance I was still paying down from covering emergencies. The savings account that never quite grew no matter how careful I was. I thought about how tired I felt all the time, even when I slept. Midnight arrived without ceremony. Someone counted down. Someone hugged me. My aunt kissed my cheek and told me I was such a good daughter. Good daughters don't cause scenes. Good daughters don't say no. I excused myself to the bathroom, locking the door behind me like I needed protection from my own family. The mirror showed a woman who looked composed, calm, perfectly fine. That was always the problem. I looked capable, so no one questioned whether I could carry more. I pressed my palms to the counter and breathed. This wasn't new. It was just louder. When I came back out, my father intercepted me near the hallway. "We'll talk details tomorrow," he said quietly. "There's no need to upset your mother tonight." And there it was. The unspoken threat wrapped in concern. I didn't answer. I just nodded, because nodding was my second language. The rest of the night blurred together. More drinks. More laughter. More subtle looks in my direction, like my compliance was already assumed. When the guests finally left and the house began to settle, my mother cornered me in the kitchen. The sink was full of glasses. The counters sticky with spilled champagne. "You did good," she said, patting my arm. "I knew you'd understand." Understand what? That my life was negotiable? That my stability was communal property? I swallowed the words and helped her clean, muscle memory taking over. By the time I grabbed my coat, my shoulders ached more than my feet. Outside, the air was freezing. I stood on the porch for a moment, breathing it in, letting the cold sting my skin. It felt honest, sharp, clear. In my car, I didn't turn the key right away. I stared at the steering wheel and felt something unfamiliar rise up through the exhaustion. Not anger. Clarity. They hadn't asked because they didn't need my consent. They'd already decided. They'd always decided. I drove home in silence, the city eerily quiet, fireworks echoing faintly in the distance. Everyone else was celebrating something new. I felt like I was standing at the edge of something ending. My phone buzzed when I got inside. A message from my mother. "We'll figure out the payments tomorrow. Proud of you." I didn't reply. I dropped my bag, kicked off my shoes, and sat on the edge of my bed, still in my coat. The room was dark, calm, mine. For the first time that night, I let myself imagine what would happen if I didn't fix this. The thought scared me and relieved me. Another message came through, this time from Lena. I didn't know they were going to say it like that. I stared at the screen. That line could mean so many things. That she didn't know they'd announce it publicly. That she didn't know they'd pressure me. Or that she didn't know I might finally stop agreeing. I typed a response. Deleted it. Typed again. Deleted that too. Because the truth was, something had shifted. Not loudly. Not dramatically. But permanently. I went to bed without setting an alarm. Without planning tomorrow. Without deciding anything. And as sleep finally pulled me under, one thought echoed, steady and unmistakable. If I said yes again, this would never stop. I didn't hear from my parents the next morning. That should have worried me. It didn't. Instead, I woke up late, sunlight cutting across my bedroom in a way that made the day feel suspended, like it was waiting for me to decide something. My phone lay face down on the nightstand. I left it there longer than usual, as if not touching it could delay whatever conversation was coming. It buzzed just after 10. Lena. I stared at her name, thumb hovering over the screen, my chest tightening with the same familiar mix of responsibility and dread. When I answered, she spoke immediately, her voice thin and rushed. "I'm so sorry," she said. "I didn't want it to happen like that." I closed my eyes and leaned back against the headboard. "Like what, Lena?" Silence. Then a shaky breath. "They already talked about it," she admitted. "Before last night. They told me not to worry because you'd help. They said you always do." The words landed harder than I expected. "So you knew," I said quietly. "Yes," she said quickly. "But I told them it wasn't fair. I told them not to put you on the spot. They said it wasn't a big deal. That you were fine." Fine. I let that word settle. It explained everything. The confidence in my mother's voice. The way my father hadn't even hesitated. This wasn't desperation. It was strategy. "Why now?" I asked. Another pause. Longer this time. "I'm behind," she said. "On rent. On a lot of things." The truth spilled out slowly, uneven and raw. Credit cards. Late notices. Borrowed money she hadn't been able to return. She hadn't lost her job, she explained. She just kept thinking she'd catch up next month. That something would work itself out. "And they knew?" I asked. "Yes." I sat very still, the room around me suddenly too quiet. "They didn't want you stressed," she added softly. "So they handled it." Handled it. By deciding I would. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I didn't even interrupt. I just listened as years of unspoken assumptions lined up neatly in front of me, undeniable and ugly. "I'm not calling to ask you to pay," Lena said quickly, panic creeping into her voice. I swear. I didn't know who else to tell. That was new. Lena didn't usually tell me things until they were already solved by someone else, usually me. When was the last time you paid your rent? I asked. October. It was January. I pressed my fingers into my palm, grounding myself. My parents hadn't sprung this on me because they were worried. They'd done it because they were cornered. And the reason they announced it? I said slowly. The reason they made it public? So you wouldn't say no, she whispered. There it was. After we hung up, I sat at my kitchen table long after my coffee went cold. I thought about all the times I'd been praised for being reliable, for being calm, for not causing trouble. I'd mistaken survival skills for virtues. The first call from my father came just before noon. I let it ring. Then my mother. Then both of them, back to back. Finally, a voicemail. You made your point, my mother said, voice tight. Now stop being dramatic and come help us fix this. Help us. I didn't delete the message. I didn't respond. I just set the phone down and stared out the window, watching people walk past my building, bundled in coats, moving toward their own lives. Something in me settled. They didn't see me as a daughter. They saw me as infrastructure. I opened my laptop and pulled up the email I'd archived months ago. The one I hadn't let myself think about since. The job offer in another city. Still valid. Still waiting. I typed a short message. Is the position still open? I didn't feel brave when I hit send. I felt terrified. The reply came an hour later. We'd love to have you. Start date flexible. My hands shook. That evening, Lena texted again. I don't want them involved anymore, she wrote. I need to fix this myself. I just need somewhere to land while I figure it out. I stared at the message for a long time. In the past, I would have said yes without thinking. I would have absorbed the cost, the chaos, the cleanup. This time, I breathed first. Then I typed back. You can stay with me, but we do this differently. Her reply came almost instantly. Okay. That single word carried more weight than any promise. I stood up, walked to my bedroom, and opened the closet. Half my clothes were already packed, though no one knew it yet. I'd started weeks ago without admitting why. That New Year's toast hadn't just crossed a line. It had exposed one. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. Lena moved in on a Thursday night with 2 suitcases and a backpack that looked like it had been stuffed in a hurry. She stood awkwardly in my doorway, eyes scanning the apartment like she was bracing herself to be told she was asking for too much. You can take the second room, I said, stepping aside. She blinked. Are you sure? Yes. No lectures. No conditions spoken out loud. Just space. That first night was quiet. Uncomfortably so. Not the tense silence of conflict, but the unfamiliar kind that comes when no one is demanding anything from you. Lena barely slept. I could hear her moving around in the early hours, careful, like she didn't want to leave fingerprints. By the second day, she had printed resumes and set them neatly on the table. She didn't ask me to look them over. She didn't ask for gas money. She just worked. I watched without hovering. That was part of the new agreement, spoken and unspoken. I wasn't here to rescue. I was here to witness. The noise from my parents started on day 3. First, polite texts. We just want to talk. This doesn't have to be so hard. Then frustration. You're being unreasonable. You're tearing the family apart. I didn't answer any of it. On Monday morning, my manager asked me to stop by HR after lunch. The walk down the hallway felt longer than usual. The HR rep smiled professionally, hands folded, voice neutral. An anonymous concern had been raised, she explained. Something about financial coercion. A vulnerable family member. No details. No evidence. I sat very still. They assured me it was protocol, that my performance record was excellent, that the issue would likely resolve itself quickly. Likely. When I got home that night, Lena was sitting at the table, notebook open, pen resting against her lips. "They're trying to scare you," she said after I told her. The fact that she said it calmly, that she saw it for what it was, stopped me short. "They can't control you anymore," she continued. "So they're trying to shake your ground." I hadn't realized how much I needed someone else to say that. 2 days later, my aunt reached out. Not with accusations, with questions. We met for coffee in a quiet place off the highway. She didn't waste time. "Your mother asked me for money last year," she said. "Said it was for Lena." Then she asked again 3 months later. Different story. My stomach tightened. "She told your cousin you were unstable," my aunt continued. "That you were overwhelmed. That you needed help managing your finances." I laughed once, sharp and humorless. "I didn't believe it," she added quickly. "Not completely. So I started asking around." She slid a flash drive across the table. "I recorded calls," she said. "Just in case." On the drive home, the pieces clicked together with sickening clarity. The toast. The pressure. The urgency. They weren't panicking. They were being exposed. That night, Lena came home with news. An interview. Receptionist position. Not glamorous. Barely above minimum wage. "I know it's not much," she said, bracing. "It's a start," I said. And I meant it. The group email came the next day. Subject: Family Matters. It was long, carefully worded, full of disappointment disguised as concern. No apology, no accountability, just the implication that I was hurting everyone by not complying. Lena read it once, then closed her laptop. "They want me to go back," she said quietly. "They said they'll forgive me if I leave." Forgive? For what? I asked. "For choosing myself," she said. Then, after a pause, "For choosing you." "They said you're controlling me," she added. "That you want me dependent so you can feel better." I felt the old anger rise, familiar and hot, but beneath it was something steadier. "They're projecting," I said. "And they won't stop unless it stops working." She nodded slowly. Then she blocked their numbers. The apartment exhaled. A week passed. Then another. Lena settled into a routine. Early mornings. Long days. Careful spending logged in her notebook. She didn't ask me for anything. She didn't need to. The silence from my parents was loud. Too loud. On a Tuesday afternoon, my aunt called again. "Your grandmother knows," she said. "And she's not happy." A family dinner had been planned, framed as reconciliation. An olive branch. "Go," my aunt said. "But don't go alone." When we arrived, the room froze. My mother stood too quickly. My father looked smaller than I remembered. The table filled slowly, tension thick enough to taste. Halfway through dinner, my grandmother tapped her fork against her glass. "I want to talk about lies," she said calmly. The room went still. And I knew, finally, that this was no longer just my breaking point. It was theirs. No one reached for their fork after my grandmother spoke. "I want to talk about lies," she repeated, her voice steady, unshaken by the tension she just dropped into the room. "And I want to do it while everyone is here." My mother opened her mouth, then closed it again. My father stared at his plate like it might offer an escape. Grandma continued calmly. No anger. No theatrics. That was what made it impossible to ignore. I've been told different stories, she said. About Nora. About Lena. About money. About responsibility. She looked directly at my parents, and none of them matched. My aunt spoke next, laying out dates, amounts, requests. The pattern was unmistakable. Loans framed as emergencies. Silence demanded in return. Loyalty weaponized. My mother tried to interrupt. Grandma raised her hand. I listened to the recordings, she said. I read the messages. I spoke to people you didn't think would compare notes. The word recordings sucked the air out of the room. My father finally looked up. His expression wasn't angry. It was panicked. You had no right, my mother said weakly. No, Grandma replied. You lost that right when you started lying. Lena squeezed my hand under the table. Her grip was firm, present. They used my name, she said suddenly, her voice quiet but unwavering. To borrow. To apply. Without telling me. Every head turned to her. I messed up, she continued. I own that. But I didn't give permission for that. The silence after her words felt heavier than anything else that night. I stood then, not because I'd planned to, because my body knew it was time. I didn't leave this family, I said, my voice even. I left a role I never agreed to play. I didn't look at my parents when I spoke. I didn't need to. I was praised for being reliable, I continued. But what that really meant was I was useful. And the moment I stopped being useful, I became the problem. No one argued. No one could. The dinner didn't explode. It deflated. Conversations ended. Plates went untouched. People left early, quietly, without confrontation. As Lena and I stood to go, relatives hugged us. Not out of pity. Out of recognition. In the car, Lena let out a breath she'd been holding for years. They told me you'd abandon me, she said softly. That you always leave when things get hard. I tightened my grip on the wheel. I believed them for a long time, she added. Until now. The drive home was quiet, but not heavy. Back at the apartment, the silence felt different. Earned. Weeks passed. The messages from my parents slowed. Then changed. Apologies that weren't really apologies. Invitations framed as healing that came with conditions attached. I didn't respond. Lena paid off her smallest debt first. Then another. She celebrated quietly, with takeout and a movie. No announcements. No speeches. She started writing at night. I'd see the glow from her room long after I went to bed. What are you working on? I asked once. A blog, she said. Anonymous. About recovery. About not staying stuck. I nodded. That made sense. 6 months later, we were invited to another family dinner. This time, the reason was Lena. A promotion. A lease of her own. Her name only. We went. Lena arrived separately. Drove herself. Shoulders back. Eyes clear. At dinner, she stood and thanked the people who supported her without conditions. She didn't mention money. She didn't mention the past. She didn't have to. Afterward, my mother approached me. She didn't cry. She didn't justify. I was wrong, she said quietly. My father nodded once. That was enough. On the way home, Lena smiled at me. I think I'm okay, she said. I smiled back. You already are. That New Year's toast didn't just expose a breaking point. It exposed the truth. And once the truth is spoken out loud, it doesn't go back into the glass. The noise didn't disappear all at once. It faded in layers. At first, it was the constant checking of my phone, expecting another message, another demand disguised as concern. Then it was the sudden quiet of weekends with no obligations attached. No dinners to brace for. No emotional cleanup afterward. I didn't realize how much space I'd been holding open for other people until it stayed empty. Lena moved into her own place that spring. A small apartment across town with uneven floors and windows that rattled when the wind picked up. She was proud of it anyway. She invited me over the first night with takeout containers and mismatched plates, laughing when one chair wobbled. "This one's mine," she said, touching the wall like she needed to prove it was real. It was. She paid her rent on time. Every time. She kept her notebook, still tracked every dollar, still went to bed early. Recovery didn't look dramatic. It looked consistent. My parents tried a few last times. Emails carefully rewritten by someone else. Messages sent through relatives who meant well but didn't know the full story. Invitations framed as apologies that never quite crossed the line into responsibility. I declined all of it. One night, months later, there was a knock at my door. It wasn't polite. I checked the peephole. My father stood there alone, shoulders stiff, jaw set. I didn't open the door. "You've ruined her," he said through the wood. "She was weak before, but at least she loved us. You poisoned her." I leaned against the door, calm in a way that surprised me. "She's stronger now," I said, "and she loves herself." He waited, then left. I turned off the porch light. Inside, Lena sat on the couch, knees pulled to her chest. She'd heard everything. "Do you think they ever loved us?" she asked quietly. I sat beside her. "I think they loved what we did for them," I said, "and confused that with love." She nodded. Not devastated, just understanding. Time did what confrontation couldn't. It created distance, and in that distance, clarity. I took the job in the other city, packed the rest of my boxes. Lena helped, folding clothes, labeling things carefully. "Promise you won't disappear," she said once, half smiling. "I won't," I said, "but I won't come back to who I was." She smiled. Good. The morning I left, the apartment felt lighter. Not empty. Open. I didn't cry when I drove away. I felt something steadier than sadness. Relief, maybe. Or peace. On New Year's Eve the following year, I stood alone on my balcony, a glass of cheap champagne in my hand. No crowd. No expectations. No audience. The city counted down in the distance. Fireworks lit the sky, brief and bright. I raised my glass, not to anyone else, but to myself. To the version of me who finally understood that being reliable didn't mean being available for exploitation. That strength didn't require silence. That boundaries weren't betrayal. The toast that broke me didn't ruin my life. It revealed it. Some things have to shatter before you can see what was never built to hold you. And this time, when the glass touched my lips, it tasted like freedom.